Hello, this is Gareth Keane, and this is the first video in a series of videos designed to teach Visual Basic programming using the Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications programming code. The examples used throughout the course will basically be engineering examples, as the course is designed for engineering students. In this initial tutorial to get started, we look at a very simple wage calculator application. This is the guideline for the form in which you have to design. So we're going to use a Visual Basic user form. We're going to put the caption wage calculator onto it. We're also going to have a number of labels, number of hours worked, and a corresponding text box to enable the user to input the number of hours which the employee has worked. We have a label hourly pay rate and a corresponding text box to enable the user to put in the appropriate pay rate. We also need somewhere to output the answer. So we have a label here for gross pay earned, and we're also going to use a label here to output the result of the calculation. What happens in practice is when the user runs this program, these two fields will be blank. They'll put in the two values, and then they come down and press this command button. This command button here has the caption calculate gross pay, and when they click on that, we're going to design and put code in it there so that the values will be taken from these text boxes, multiplied together, and the result will be put out into this label. There's also a second button here which will enable the user to close down the application. There's a standardized naming convention within Visual Basic for naming controls such as the labels and text boxes, but you only need to name them if they're going to be changed and manipulated in the Visual Basic code. So in this case the form isn't going to be changed, so it's left. There's no need to change the name on it. The default name, form 1, will do. The same with these labels here. They're not going to be changed as the program runs, so there's no need to name the labels. However, this text box will be used in the code, so we give it a name, an appropriate name, and you notice here that two text boxes have a three-letter prefix TXT, and that's a standard naming convention for text boxes in Visual Basic. So we have text hours worked and text pay rate. The three-letter prefix for label is LBL, so you see the label where the answer is going to go is called LBL gross pay, and this name will be used in the Visual Basic code, so that's why you have to name it. Likewise, the buttons have the three-letter prefix BTN, so BTN calc gross pay and BTN close. Alternatively, you'll see in some other programming books, you'll also see the convention where CMD can be used, short for command button. Before any code can be added, it's a good idea to add across to the ribbon here. There's a developer tab or option that we can add to the ribbon across the top. And the way we add that is to come to File, Options, and we come to Customize Ribbon on the left hand side here. And you'll see over here Customize the Ribbon main tabs, and if we go down we see the only option here not selected is the Developer tab. So if I just check that option there, come to OK, you can see it's now been added to the top here. Once the Developer tab is up here, you can see that when you click on it, it opens up a lot of options or commands related to recording macros, and you can see here Visual Basic. So if I click on this, it opens up a separate window, which is the Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications related to this spreadsheet. It has a number of references to the sheets on the spreadsheet. If you come back to the spreadsheet, you'll see that there's Sheet 1, Sheet 2 and Sheet 3. So it has a reference to each of those. In our case, we want to insert our own user form, so I come to Insert, User Form. And it comes up with a blank page here to enable us to draw a user form. I want to make this one just a little bit bigger, so I take the corner handle like so, click on the left button of the mouse and I drag it out. Now if you look at here, you see the name of the user form is user form and the caption is user form 1. If I go back to the spreadsheet, you can see we want to caption wage calculator and the name Form 1. So I can just click in there. If we want to call it Form 1, I can get rid of the word user there just with the backspace. And I can come in here to the caption. And you can see as I start typing here, it'll appear up here. So I call this one wage calculator. So you can see that is now showing. We have the minimize button, the expand maximize button, and the close button up here. The next thing I'm going to do is to start adding these labels here. So there's a grid here. That won't appear when it's run. It's there to help you design it. We're going to use, there's an array of different, in this toolbox, there's an array of different controls which we can add. This one here is the label. The next one is the text box. And down here is the command button. Now make sure when you're using these you get the correct one. So we'll go for the label first of all. And I don't need to give it a name, but I come down to the caption and just check what it says. Number of hours worked. So I come in here to the caption. So you can see that these controls have a range of properties associated with them. At the moment we'll just stick with the ones that are relevant to what we're doing here. Now I'll minimize the size of that, but if you notice this is left aligned. So one of the properties I'm going to change is to come down to the text align property down here. If I click on that, you'll see we have three options. One is form text align left, FM, format text align center, text align right. So I'm going to go for a third one, which is text align right. And you can see now that the text is aligned on the right hand side of that label. The next thing I'll put in is the text box that corresponds to that. So I should explain here, I think, that I click here and then I move over to the form. I click with the left button of the mouse and I drag out a window to put the text box in. Now if I want to, I can just move it. If you see, I can move it up, I can move it down. But also what I can do is if I want to change the size of it, I have two properties down here. One is the width, so it's now 70. I can make that a little narrower, so I'll make it 50 pixels wide. And there's a height in here somewhere. Height, and I'll make it 20 high. It didn't like that. Oh, I made a mistake there. It's now 20 high. So I'll continue with the next. It's hourly pay rate. So if I come to a label here, the capital A, once again I map out hold the left button down and map out the label. I don't need to name the label, but I do need to change the caption, and it's, sorry, I need to check it, hourly pay rate. So I click in here, I type in hourly pay rate, like so. I can make that a little bit smaller, narrow the frame there. Now also what I can do here is align that on the right hand side, like so. Next I'm going to put the text box in beside it, and I map it out somewhere. I'll try and make it the same size, but even if you can see it's slightly bigger, the easiest thing to do there is to come to the width again, which is 54, but I'll make it 50 wide, and the height. Now these are done alphabetically, but I can also come to categorize them, and you can see here that the height, the left top, and the width are shown. So the height is 20. So now both of these boxes are identical in size. The next two things I need to put in are the label for gross pay earned and the label gross pay. So I come back up here to label. Type in the caption, I type gross pay earned. So I come down, I make it alignment, where is it? This one. text align is here under behavior, and it's right aligned. And the next thing, the last thing I need is another label for the answer. I just put that in like so. And that's going to be a bit high. I'll put it down like so, so it's in line with gross pay earned. I'm going to get rid of the caption here, so I just blank it out. And we want to call this LBL, gross pay. So at the moment it's blank, but when we run the program, the correct answer will go in there. We need two buttons, so be careful where your buttons are. They're down here. So it's the second column, third row, command button here. I click there and I map this one out. I call this button BTN, calc gross pay, like so. And I need to change the caption on it, so it's instead of button 1, it's calculate gross pay, and I'm going to put a second button in there. And it's a good idea to have these the same size, so if I look at the width and the height of this one, height is 30, width is 90, so that's the standard size. I'll do the same with this one, 30, and I make the width the same. So this is BTN. The name of this one is, go in there, delete that and do BTN close. And the caption is close. And back here, this is button calculate gross pay, so it's been named correctly, and the caption is correct. And this one we need to name TXT hours worked, and this text box is, let's just check what it is on the spreadsheet, text pay rate. So TXT pay rate. So I'll just double check all the controls are properly named. Text hours worked, text pay rate, label gross pay, button calculate gross pay, and button close. So the next thing we do, we can resize this window a little bit, just so all the controls are there. It's a little bit neater. And now we can start to write the code. So the first thing we need to do is to open up, double click on this button. And when we double click, it opens up a window to enable us to put in Visual Basic Code. It has private sub. Sub is short for subroutine. Private just has to do with the scope of the subroutine. We'll deal with that in later lectures. You have the name of the control, button calculate gross pay, an underscore, and then you have an event called click. So we're going to put code into here, and that code is going to be executed when the user clicks the button calculate gross pay. There are other events in here as well, a list of other events which could trigger the code to be executed as well. Now the first thing we need to do, if you look at this, if we go back to the form, is we have a number of values which we need to read in. We need to read in the hours, we need to read in the pay rate, and we also need a variable to store the gross pay, the result of the calculation. So the first thing we need to do when we have variables, we need to dimension them. So if we have a variable called hours worked, and I follow a convention used in Java where hours worked is 2 words, the second word is capitalized, the first word uses lowercase, and that's the same convention used up above here. And I'm going to declare that as a single. Now that means that hours worked can be, if you come back here, the hours worked can be a whole number or an integer, or it could be a half an hour. Somebody could work 39 hours and a quarter in a week, or 30 hours and a quarter, or 30 hours and a half. And likewise, the pay rate can have a fractional part or decimal part. So if I go to this sheet here, you'll see that there's different data types. One is a byte, Boolean is for true or false, and integer is for whole numbers that range from minus 32,000 up to plus 32,000. If we have a number that has to be, if we have an integer but it's bigger than these values, then we have to declare the variable as a long. If, however, our variable has a decimal part to it, we can either declare it as single precision or double precision. You're all familiar with the concept of a byte. You have a gigabyte of memory. Well, a kilobyte is 1024 bytes. And basically all memory is stored in the random access memory, or the memory of the computer. What a single precision basically is what a double precision is. It uses 8 bytes to store value. It can store much bigger values. The single can store from minus 3.4 up to by 10 to 38, down to minus 1.4 by 10 to the minus 45. However, a double precision can store much bigger numbers because they go up to 10 to the 308. Single and double precision basically have to do with the idea that if I say 10 is divided by 3, you know that 10 divided by 3 is 3.33333. And if I keep expanding the number of points that are shown here, you can see that now it shows a 0. So if I count these up, we'll come in here and count them up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So Excel stores real numbers, or floating numbers. That means numbers that have decimal parts with double precision. And it shows 15 significant figures. If I was to show it if I was to store it as a single value, it would only show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many are there? 3, 6, 7. It would store 7 significant figures. So it would chop off the rest of it, and all that information that we had will be lost. So if I put them beside each other, the double precision has that level of preciseness or accuracy. The single precision truncates or loses the last 0.0003. So you can see using this one is more accurate, but it takes twice as much memory. Okay, if I go back to the code, we also need to declare hours worked as a single, pay rate as a single, and gross pay as a single. The next thing we'll do is we read in. What I'll do is an input section here, so I put in a comment, and the way I put in a comment to break up the code is to use a single quotation mark. It's above the shift button, near the @ same button as the @ button, and input section. And you can see it's a comment, so this line will not be executed, but it's there to help you as a programmer. If you come to look at this code again, you can see if it's working or not. You can see what this next section is about. The next thing is hours worked is equal to text hours worked full stop. Now if I do full stop and this context menu comes up, this is all the properties of that text box, and it comes up automatically as long as you put the name in correctly. That means that it exists out on the form. Remember, what I'm basically saying is I named this one here as text hours worked. So if I go to look at the code by clicking in here, as long as I name it correctly and then I come to the code and use it, that menu will come up when I hit the full stop. If it doesn't come up, it means you haven't named it correctly. Now I come down to the text property. That refers to the text that's actually in the cell. Likewise, pay rate is equal to text pay rate, and I hit the full stop and it comes up automatically with the menu. That means I've named it correctly. I type text and press enter. So I've input the hours worked and the pay rate. Next section is calculations. I put in a comment and I say gross pay, and you have to make sure you use the same name that you're using up here. Is equal to hours worked multiplied by pay rate. And if you see I do it in lowercase, watch what happens when I press the enter key here. It automatically comes back up here, and if I have capital W and capital O there, it'll automatically apply them here. The next thing is output. Where do I want to put my output? Well, I want to put that result back out here onto that label. So if I come to the code by double clicking there, I can then say that label gross pay is equal to gross pay. So remember, what the variables do is they point to locations in the memory where the values are stored. So what this statement here does, it takes the value from the text box and stores it in the memory in a variable called hours worked. This statement takes the value the user puts into the text box for the pay rate and stores it in a variable somewhere in the memory in a variable location called pay rate. It's called a variable, basically, this name, but it's pointing to a location in memory. In this next statement, the VB goes and searches for these values in the memory. It extracts them out, whatever values are stored in these two memory locations, multiplies them together, and then assigns the result into the gross pay variable. This is still in the memory of the computer, so if you want to display it to the user, you take it from the memory of the computer and you basically set the caption of the label to the value that's in that variable gross pay. So if I run this program by pressing the arrow up here, you can see I put in 10 for the hours worked, 15 for the hourly pay rate. I press calculate pay and it says gross pay earned is 150. Now if you notice there it has a $sign in the example. So if I wanted a $sign, I could put it in here, it's above the 4, and I use what's known as an ampersand to join the value of gross pay together with the $sign. So if I run it this time, 10, 15, you can see the spreadsheet sitting behind it, it puts the dollar on this time. So if you go back to the form, we also need to put some code together with this button. So I double click on the close button, it comes up again, button close, click, and I just do a simple command here, unload me. This will allow the Visual Basic to unload the form. It uses the me keyword to allow the form to refer to itself. So if I run it now, number of hours worked 10, pay rate is 15, calculate the gross pay, it's correct. And then I click close, it closes down the program. So that's that program finished. So well done if you get that done, and then you can try the next one on the list. Okay, thank you for listening. There's one thing I forgot to say before we finish. What you have to do is make sure when you save this, you go File, Save As, and instead of saving it, give it a name first of all. So I call it Wage Calculator. But the important thing here is I'm saving it on the desktop on my laptop. You will save it on the Z drive. But what you have to do is make sure you save it as the second option, Excel macro enabled workbook. If you don't do this, everything you've just done will be lost. So save the spreadsheet as macro enabled. Now I can close it down. Thank you very much for listening.